Hello and welcome to the second clip in the Riding Around the Countryside around Launceston video series. I have no particular destination in mind, and as you recall at the beginning of the last clip I was on Eccleston Road, and as far as I know it's still called Eccleston Road and I'm still on it. At the end of the last video, or towards the end of the last video, I passed the entrance to the Tasmania Zoo. And that's a place that's well worth visiting. It's a traditional zoo with animals, lots of Australian animals of course, but they also have a dinosaur garden, so it's an interesting place to visit. And if you go at certain times of the day, there are live feedings of the Tasmanian devils, which is always an interesting thing. Talking about the road surface for the moment, you can see here that the road is quite wide. There is a marking down the middle. There are the white posts on either side of the road, and there's a bit of a shoulder which is not very firm and not very wide, but it is there. I would like to see white lines on the edges of the road, so that, as I said in the last video, at night time when you're riding on here, you know where the edge of the road is. You can see here there are places where the shoulder is a little wider, and I'd suggest at any stage on a road like this, if you're getting off your bike, get as far off the road as you can, but be sure that you're on firm ground before you put the stand down. The last thing you want to do is for your bike to topple over into a gully or something like that, or the shoulder be soft and the bike stand sink into it and it topple over. And although this road doesn't seem to get much traffic, the last thing you want to do is get off your bike and be collected by a car that's not expecting you, and you're not expecting it either. In the last video I talked about some of the costs associated with motorcycling, in particular purchase prices, insurance, servicing, those sort of things, and I thought I would continue that discussion for a little while, focusing on another aspect of the costs and arrangements in having a bike and keeping it on the road, and then see where that discussion takes me. At the moment we're heading west from Launceston towards those hills in the background that I think are called the Great Western Tiers, and at some point shortly we'll come to an intersection and I'll make some decisions about which way I'm going to go. But we've just entered the Meander Valley local government area as opposed to the West Tamar local government area. Alright, so I was talking about, as I said in the last video, the costs of motorcycling. That includes the cost of purchasing your bike and then the associated cost of equipment and so on. And that all came about because of a discussion that came up on a YouTube video. And as a consequence of that, I got talking in the same video about, or to the same group of people, about the different procedures involved in various states for getting your bike on the road. Now, I suppose I should say at this stage, 3 minutes into the video, if you don't want to listen to me talking about these things, just turn the volume down and enjoy the scenery. And if you are interested, then by all means, keep the volume up, and at the end of the video, if there's something you'd like to comment about, please do so. Now, I can talk with some experience about what's involved in getting a bike and keeping your bike on the road in New South Wales and in Tasmania. The other states I think have slightly different arrangements, but I guess they're all sort of variations on the similar theme. So first of all, let's start with New South Wales. In New South Wales, if you own a vehicle that is new and less than 5 years old, or even if it's not new, if you buy it second-hand and it's less than 5 years old, you get a document from the state government every year saying your registration is due, and you also get a statement or a document from the insurance company that offers what is called CTP, or compulsory third-party insurance, or in New South Wales it's called green slip insurance, because the bills always come on a green piece of paper. And in order for you to register your vehicle, you must first of all pay the green slip insurance, and then you pay the registration. And you can do that sort of stuff online, and then your vehicle is good to go. After your bike, car, whatever, has reached 5 years of age or more, you have to have an annual inspection. So what was once a 2-stage process is now a 3-stage process. And you can see here I'm just coming to a T intersection. I wasn't quite sure which way to go at first, so I thought I'd go right. What was a 2-stage process now becomes a 3-stage process. The first stage of the process is that you must have an annual roadworthy inspection. Now, back in the day, the service station or the motor repairer that you went to was an authorised inspection station. Not everyone was, but somewhere on site there was a mechanic who was authorised to conduct vehicle safety checks. And he had a book, and he ticked all the boxes or whatever and gave you a pink piece of paper. So with the roadworthy certificate or roadworthiness assessment was called the pink slip. Now, even though it's white now and it's done electronically, it's still referred to by people who can remember that era as the pink slip. So you have to get a pink slip. Now, what happens here is you have to take your car to an authorised inspection station. Somebody there is obviously authorised and qualified to inspect it. There's a set of procedures and things that they have to do. They have to check things like tyres, brakes, lights, windscreen wipers, windscreen washers, and so on. All of those things to say that your car is roadworthy. It doesn't mean it's in good mechanical condition, not making any comment about that. They're just saying that the basic functions of the vehicle that make it roadworthy and presumably safe to be on the road are there. There's a flat fee, which I think for cars is $36 and for motorcycles is $23, because obviously there's some things on a motorcycle like windscreen wipers and washers that you don't have to inspect. So the inspection takes about half an hour or so, and I actually have done it a couple of times, taken my bike in, and I've sat there on the bike and the bloke has said, put your foot on the brakes, pull the front brake lever, turn the blinkers on, turn the headlight on, turn on the high beam and so on, and then he's ticked all the boxes and given me the bit of paper. What happens is they lodge the e-safety certificate, as it's called now, or e-safety inspection, electronically with the Roads and Maritime Services in New South Wales. If your bike or car doesn't meet all the requirements for getting that certificate, they issue you with this document that says these are the things that have to be fixed. And because it's then registered with the document is kept on file at the Roads and Maritime Service, you can't go to another bloke and say, well, that bloke knocked me back, I'll just try somebody else. You have to then get those things attended to. I think this here is the Meander River that I'm crossing at the moment. You have to get those things attended to. So if the inspection says your tyres are bald, you've got to get a new tyre. If it says your windscreen wipers need new blades, well, you've got to get new blades and so on. Then you get the certificate issued. So you get the road safety certificate or the roadworthy certificate first. Then you get the green slip, or as I said, the CTP insurance slip. And you pay that, and when you've paid both of those, the government will allow you to pay the registration, and your vehicle is good to go. You can do that from when the vehicle is 5 years old until it's dead. And every year after that, you'll have to get it inspected. Now, in Tasmania, the system is slightly different. You get a document from the I think it's called the Department of State Growth, that says the registration on your vehicle is due and this is what it's going to cost you. You're not required to have an annual inspection of your vehicle for roadworthiness, and built into the document you get from the Department of State Growth is what is referred to in Tasmania as the MAIB, or Motor Accident Insurance Board, which I think is their equivalent of CTP. So the component of compulsory third-party insurance is already factored into your insurance. You pay one bill either online or at Services Tasmania, and your vehicle is registered and ready to go on the road again. Now, I'm not saying one system is better than the other, except in this regard. In New South Wales, after your vehicle is 5 years old, it has to have an annual inspection. So that means at least once a year, you've got to have things like the tyres and the brakes and the lights and the blinkers and the windscreen wipers and all, whatever those things are, and the same things on your motorcycle checked to make sure that they're all roadworthy. Now, you might think, well, okay, people would get their car serviced at least once a year, but if you're a person who only drives a few kilometres to the shops or to the church on Sunday, or only rides your motorcycle around town, as I do with my Tasmanian one, it's unlikely that you're going to rack up many kilometres, and therefore you're probably not going to put it in for service every year. For example, the one I have in Tasmania, the Suzuki Bergman, when I bought it, I think 5 or 6 years ago, it had 9,000 kilometres on it, and now it's got 13,000 kilometres on it. So even at a regular servicing every 5,000 kilometres, it still hasn't reached that point. Just because I mainly ride it around town and occasionally go on the longer trips with it. So because I'm only riding it around town, it's unlikely that I'm going to put it in every year and have a service, and therefore it's not necessarily going to be checked to see if the tyres are all in good condition and if the brakes are working and that all the lights are functioning and so on. You know if the headlight's functioning because you turn it on and you can see it's there. You don't know if the brake lights are functioning because you're on the front of the bike and you can't test them while you're on there. And whilst we're all diligent people, how many people, in all honesty, before they get in their car, look at the tyres, look at the windscreen wipers, look at the windscreen washers, look at the headlights, look at the blinkers, that sort of stuff, and make sure that's all working? Nobody does. You get in your car, you turn the key and you drive away. So the annual inspection that's conducted in New South Wales, whilst it's a bit of a nuisance, as an extra cost, like I said, I think it's $36 for cars and $23 for bikes. It's a bit of a nuisance. It's at least once a year to check that your car is roadworthy. Now, the Tasmanian system has a bonus, and you can see I'm coming to another T intersection here, and I couldn't again make up my mind which way I wanted to go, but Launceston is to the left, and I think after I sat here and waited for cars for a little while, I decided I'd go right rather than go directly back to Launceston, but let me see what happens. In Tasmania, in New South Wales, as I said earlier, you have to, as the consumer, shop around and find the appropriate or the CTP insurance. Once upon a time, back in the day, there was a body called the Government Insurance Office, and the GIO, as it was called, had the responsibility for writing all third-party insurance in New South Wales. The Liberal government of the time, in the 90s I think it was, decided they wanted to sell the GIO. So in order to make it more attractive, they insisted that all insurance companies would then be able to compete for third-party insurance policies. And every insurance company has to offer them. But the fact is many insurance companies offer them, but offer them at such ridiculous prices that they never have to write any policies. For example, when I've tried to register my Kawasaki Vulcan Voyager, the green slip insurance is generally around $550 thereabouts. When I've rung around to get quotes, I've not found it any cheaper than the $550, but I've heard insurance companies have quoted me $800. Now, the risk is this: I accept that I'm an older rider, and so it might be slightly more risky to insure me, but there's an awful lot of difference between $550 and $800. And the $800 quote tells me that the insurance company is required by law to offer a policy, but they don't actually want to write any, so they just offer it at a ridiculous premium, knowing full well no one will pay $800 for it. That's an extra step in the process, and whilst you can do it all online, it's just another thing that you have to do to get your car registered. I think that in places like Victoria and Queensland, they have a similar system, except they have 3 or 4 preferred providers rather than just you keep shopping until you find what you want. In Victoria and Queensland also, I think, and also in the ACT, you're not required to have the annual vehicle inspection. I think it's only New South Wales that has the annual vehicle inspection. In Tasmania, as I said, they have this body called the MAIB, Motor Accident Insurance Board, and I suspect that one of the reasons that they haven't gone to a model similar to the other states, or certainly like New South Wales, is because the market in Tasmania is obviously fairly small. There's only 550,000 people in the whole island, and if every one of them owned a car, there would only be 500,000 cars as opposed to probably 2 or 3 million cars in New South Wales, maybe more, and another 3 million or so in Victoria. The market is fairly small, and so although you'd think, well, the risks are also small because it's a smaller population, the health costs and the associated costs of looking after a person who's injured in a motor vehicle accident, or especially someone who's catastrophically injured in a motor vehicle accident, are the same as anywhere else in Australia. So the possibilities of or the attractiveness of selling policies in Tasmania isn't great. It may well be that the government has a commitment to the MAIB model, and just thinks that's the easiest way to go and it's the simplest way. It works well for us. It works for the motorists. People get their cars registered and they're on the road. No fuss, no muss. Let's stick with what works. But given the predilection that governments have for selling things and getting a sugar hit to the budget, it is a bit of a surprise that they haven't done that, or perhaps they've thought about it and found it wasn't worthwhile. Anyway, so that's the breakdown of how you keep your car or bike, particularly bikes, since that's what we're talking about at the moment, on the road in New South Wales and on the road in Tasmania. Now, we're then heading towards the village of Westbury. We'd gone through Hagley, and gone through the village, or going towards the village of Westbury when I decided I didn't really want to go to Westbury. It's a lovely village, but I didn't want to go there again. So I've turned back onto what is the Bass Highway, which takes you back towards Launceston, but you go in, you come in at a different point. So I'm going to head down this road for a little while longer, and then at a certain point coming up just before the end of this video, I'm going to turn off and head towards another village called Longford. I'm not actually going to go to Longford, but I'm going to go in that general direction and end up in another village called Perth. So this is the major highway between Devonport, which is where the Spirit of Tasmania docks, and Launceston. Once the highway leads out of Launceston going south, it becomes the Midland Highway, because the area through from Launceston to Hobart is known as the Northern and Southern Midlands. In parts, the Bass Highway here is a dual carriageway, but most of it is a single lane each way. Nevertheless, it's, as you can see, quite wide here, well marked on the centre line, well marked on the sides with those white lines I referred to, guardrails where appropriate, white posts where appropriate as well. So it's in pretty good condition. And when you consider that one of the main things that comes off the Spirit, besides tourists, is freight, and a lot of trucks head straight down this road from here, from Devonport to Launceston and then Hobart, it's almost essential that this road be as well maintained and as in good condition as it is for the most part. One of the things about Tasmania is that even though it's a fairly small island and a small population, and therefore the government has a small budget, or a smaller budget than other states to work with, is that for the most part the roads are pretty good. And the reason for that is in the heydays of forestry and hydro and mining, they had to build good roads to get so the trucks could get to the remote places where the forests were, get the remote places where they were doing the hydro work and so on. And so they built good roads, and for the most part those roads are still generally well maintained. As I said, we're about going to turn off fairly shortly, but this video is about to come to an end. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my discussion about registration procedures in various states, and I'll talk to you again in the next video. Thank you for watching.